Chris, we got more faces today. Why the heck are all these people here? What are we talking about?
We're going to talk about a very cool new feature that is provided by the assistant, Smart Forecast, in our pricing module. And yeah, we do have two new faces. This is exciting. First time we've brought guests on here. But I'll let Kyle and James introduce themselves and what they do here at ShareBuilders. Kyle?
Yep, I'm Kyle Dingus. I am a data scientist here at ShareBuilders, and I had a large part in helping to build smart forecasts.
And James?
I'm James. It's good to see you all again. I am the product manager here at ShareBuilders that oversees the pricing side, so kind of pricing and all things yield management.
Awesome. Great. So we're going to talk again, like I said, a little bit about Smart Forecast today. James and Kyle are here because they were obviously both very impactful in the development of this feature. So James, why did we develop Smart Forecast?
Yeah, so we built Smart Forecast as just another tool to really help stations predict where the forecast is going to land up further out. So if you think about it, humans, like we're really good at getting forecasts as they get closer to the end of the month closing and the time period closing. But when you're really far out and there's like a lot to pay attention to, and we all can kind of very emotional about the numbers, it's a predictive model that could just help us kind of give us the best guess of where we're going to land up at. Just as be another kind of tool in our arsenal we could look at when we're trying to actually manually set those forecasts.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think for those of us, or for those people watching that subscribe to our pricing model, I think they might know some of the things that go into forecasting in general, but what are some of the specifics that go into smart forecasts that allow it to, I guess, maybe see further out into the future and give us some more accuracy versus, again, being more emotionally tied to like a number that's closer to budget, which I think is the natural human behavior. This takes that bias out throws it out the window a bit and really focuses on those specific factors.
Yeah. Kyle, do you want to maybe get into more of the model itself?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that's important to highlight is that when we built Smart Forecast, we wanted to have something that was kind of specific to our individual, like station level clients. So what that means is that we actually consider the specific history for each one of our the stations that our clients operate with. So when you think about that, what we do is we kind of take a lot of the historical trends in your data. So if you're looking at a specific month, we will kind of have used the history of all the months that you've booked previously. We'll use the historical trends, kind of how far along you are at specific points in the quarter. We'll also try to adjust for other things. So, if you have the Super Bowl in February, obviously we could expect you to have a lot more money that's going to be booked by the end of the month there. And we also take into account other things like if there's going to be political crowd out, is sports gambling been legalized recently? So we kind of try to take a view of kind of what are your historical trends on your specific station and what are your booking patterns, and then we also incorporate some other information that might also be relevant, like political crowd out, big events and things like that.
That's fantastic. Those are also important when we're talking about forecasting. One thing that I know has changed a lot in the industry in the last couple of years is history is great, but what are we doing to account for more like current trends as opposed to like just looking at year over year in history? Because it seems as though business is changing more rapidly in how it comes in versus how maybe it did 2, 3 years, 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, and that's true. And what we do is we also kind of incorporate your more recent history. So we take a look at one part of that looks at, the past couple of years, but we also look at, what have the past, several months, have things been booking over the past 3-6 months as well, to try to kind of account for both that long-term history and, as you mentioned, like if there are recent trends that are also happening, taking those into account too, which is kind of when you're a person and you're looking at the data, that's kind of what you're trying to do as well. And so it's kind of in line with that process to take into account, long-term trends, short-term trends, and those kind of things.
Yeah. Something else I'd point out, Chris, too, is that unlike traditional approaches, it's not really a static model. It's a model that we keep on reteaching itself, and it's kind of learning and evolving over time. So that means is even if it's, like you were talking, like these changes you see from maybe 2 or 3 years ago, as those changes happen in the future and move forward, the model itself will kind of adapt and grow and change with that. So we'll kind of capture those changes that you're seeing, whether it be like industry-wide changes or even just within your market or within your station. So So yeah, I think it's important to kind of point out that it's not really just like a static model. It's something that will kind of grow and evolve and change over time with you and your use case.
Yeah, and that's become the most important aspect to all of this, from my perspective at least, is again, as the industry becomes more dynamic and just moving quicker in general with these changes, that something that may have worked to forecast again a couple of years ago may not work as well today, and the ability for us to adapt in the assistant to be able to adapt that model is probably the most important feature that we could get excited about here with Smart Forecast.
And then,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that in addition to kind of the continually updating models as well, we do continue to kind of monitor feedback and performance to make sure that if we do have a situation where there's a rapid change or something like that, and we see an area to kind of improve the accuracy of the model, that we can incorporate that and release that as well. We've actually released some improvements since we originally released the first version of Smart Forecast to try to incorporate some of that feedback as well, especially relying on feedback from our expert consultants and kind of helping to shore up areas where we think it could do a little better, or where and seeing where it's doing a good job already.
That's a good segue to my next question, Kyle. Anytime we talk about anything that's assistant related, especially that pertains to like modeling, tell me a little bit more about the accuracy of Smart Forecast, if you have
Sure.
that at your fingertips.
Yeah, so it's generally what I like to do is kind of compare it to the kind of accuracy of the pricing targets that we set, and also kind of the station forecast that we set. Those aren't necessarily perfect one-to-one comparisons, but they're pretty good benchmarks for us to kind of have some reference point to say, hey, is this thing actually working? Because we need it to be working fairly well for it to be something that we can rely on. And so that in that testing and that performance, we found that about 4 to 6 months out from the close date of a month, it's around 5% more accurate than the pricing targets that we generally set across all of our stations. In the kind of 3 to 4 month range, it's about 3% more accurate, and then within the last month or two, it's kind of about 1 to 2%, but mostly kind of in the same general area as the pricing targets there. So we have found that it's a little bit more accurate, kind of the further out you go, and than the pricing targets that we generally set. Now, it's important to keep in mind that our pricing targets goal is not necessarily always just to nail the exact final prediction, but it does give us a good benchmark to show that this thing is pretty good and pretty accurate at actually forecasting what the final value is going to be for a month.
Yeah, and I know when talking to television operators across the country, it is becoming more and more important as it pertains to balancing budgets, heading to Wall Street to talk to investors or just your owners of your companies. That accuracy is paramount at this point. So really love this feature. Guys, thanks for joining us today. We always try to keep this to about 10 minutes, and I think we've done a good job of that here. We're coming up on that time. So if you have any questions, you can always just look below. Our information's right there to reach out to any of us individually, and make sure you click the subscribe button there on YouTube if you are enjoying these talks. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Kyle and James. Excuse me, for joining us. Appreciate it.